Today we're going to take a look at Dragon Delves, the new adventure that was put out and released just a few days ago. As of today, it is the 12th of September 2025, quarter 2. And just to mention ahead of time that this is kind of a peek through, not really a total spoiler, but if you're going to intend to play these adventures with your players, make sure they don't watch this video, I guess. The other thing I wanted to mention is that in a couple weeks or less, the third weekend, we will be having our Founders Day celebration event. So not this next weekend, but the weekend after that. So the 25th through the 27th, and we're going to celebrate the community and the people who make up the community. And we'll have guests, a couple games, that sort of thing. And the signups will be on our Discord server. So if you want to participate or do a show, there is a sign up for that. So here we go. So this is the Fantasy Grounds interface, latest edition, version 4.7.5 Ultimate Edition. And this is the 5e rule set with the 2024 rules. If for some reason you don't care for the new rules or you don't want to play them in the Fantasy Grounds itself, you can change that. So if you have it on the 2024 rule set in the settings, it's more open, like you can play both the legacy and the newer stuff kind of mixed together. But for the game rules version, if you change it to legacy, then it will mostly apply to older 5e content. So anything made up till up until now, basically, or up until a couple months ago. So some people don't embrace the new rule set. That's fine, but nonetheless, I'm going to take a look at some of the content. So first and foremost, if you buy the rule set on Fantasy Grounds, you'll get these fancy dice. So don't fret if you don't buy the adventure right away, and players may not be qualified for this because it is kind of like a exclusive for the adventure. So if you don't buy the adventure, you likely won't have access to these dice because there's product tie-in dice now. So there's the Blade Lord, I think, which comes from the new Eberron. And then the Dragon Queen with effects one comes with this adventure that we're going to look at, which is Dragon Delves. But if you are already into these dice and you have collections and such, there's already one that's very similar. So I think it's under the monster dice. And there's like a Bloodstalker that kind of looks like that. And then I believe there's like a dragon one that's very similar. So like this worm scales is kind of similar to the Dragon Queen one. So you're not missing out on too much if you don't pick it up. But nonetheless, this is the new dice set that comes with it. And what I'm seeing here is, since it is the Dragon Queen, there's like a variety of effects that come off of it. So it's not just one specific effect. It's like lightning, poison, fire, ice, all those different things. So when you let go of this, it kind of has a little bit of everything. So it's kind of a mixture of effects and colors when it comes to the trailing effects. So that's the dice set that comes with this. Let's take a look at the book itself. So if you're kind of new to Fantasy Grounds, when you open up your modules, if you have them enabled, this is what you would see for modules. And you can activate them through here, or you can do it through the setup screen. But essentially, this is the Dungeons and Dragons Dragon Delves, and then here are the 5e rulebooks for the 2024 rule set. So the next thing I wanted to show you is if you click on books, this is kind of the same thing, but this is when you go through, like you're going to pick something off your bookshelf. And in this case, I'll click on the Dragon Delves, and that will bring up the adventure. And I kind of already have this pre-sized, so it's kind of already sized to the size of the screen that I would like it to be. So before I did the video, I went ahead and stretched this out so we can see it a little bit better. And as you go through this adventure, you'll notice there's 10 different adventures. They're all supposed to be shorter adventures, so they're not super long. And 3 of them are like solo adventures for a player and a game master. So there's like 3 adventures in here that features good dragons. There's brass, bronze, and I don't remember what the other, copper. So these ones feature good dragons in which you either get to assist or play a dragon, if I remember right. And those would be like a solo quest that you could play with one player and a GM. Pretty certain you could probably adapt it to a multiplayer if you really worked at it, if you wanted to. And then on top of that, then you have the other adventures, which are more centered around your iconic colors, you know, the green, black, blue, white. And those essentially are one-shots. And these are not set in any specific setting, so you can play them in any rule set that's, you know, for 5e. And then they also have like the updated 2024 rules in them, like stat blocks, spells, that sort of thing. And I did a little research, and I was thinking if you were playing, let's say, like Tyranny of Dragons, some of the older content, it's not too hard to adapt some of that structure or the adventure itself. So if you, let's say you were playing Tyranny of Dragons, it's kind of centered around a cult. So you can insert some of these one-shots in there, like if you had like an in-between time, or perhaps there's some slow parts in your adventure. And then if you're going to use Fizban's Treasury of Dragons, that gives you more details on designing dragon lairs and some of the other kind of meta stuff that would go around helping you run an adventure that's centered around dragons. So even though they're different rule sets, so to speak, or different versions, I don't think it would be too hard, kind of an intermediate task to take older content and adapt it to the newer content. And I think that was the intent initially. I don't think they were trying to sell us a different rule set. I think they really wanted to keep some of that older stuff because they knew it was popular. So based on what I could tell, anything narrative like storytelling, that sort of thing, probably won't need to be changed much. The only real things that might need adjustments are like the legendary stat blocks for dragons. I think the breath weapon, hit points, maybe some spells are different, but essentially they are very similar. I don't think it would take a lot of work to update the monsters in the Tyranny of Dragons adventure if you wanted to play it in, you know, with 2024 characters and such. And that's the main difference. So the characters, NPC stat blocks, spells, those are the most, you know, most of the changes. But like tables, magic items, you know, those sort of things shouldn't be that much different. But you could adapt some of that older material for the 2025 rule set, and depending on what it changes or what type of immersion you're trying to do and how much detail you want will determine how long it would take. But for a narrative thing, probably only like 5 or 10 minutes, you know, at the most. And that includes if you have players that are kind of newer, or I mean like the 2024 characters, they have different backgrounds and such. And then also maybe adjusting stat blocks somewhat. But other than that, I don't think there would be a whole lot of work involved. Pretty much adventure shouldn't be too hard to play with the newer rule set. But going the other way, I don't think it works as well. You'd have to do. I probably do have to do a lot more work. I haven't really thought about that process yet, but I'm sure there's people that says, "Oh, I want to play this adventure, but I don't want to play with the new rules." You could probably do the same thing, just change the monsters to the older 5e 2014 rules if you want to do something like that. But essentially, you get like exposure to all of the different, or most of the dragon types. And then you have 3 adventures that are centered around the good dragons, and those tend to be solo adventures for like 1 GM and 1 player, and then the other ones are more multiplayer. But these are all one-shots. So when I was told about the page count, I kind of was wondering, like, how would they cram 10 adventures in there? But now it makes more sense because they're more like a one-shot as opposed to an epic quest. You could tie these together somehow and kind of do your own Tyranny of Dragons type adventure. If you did some thinking and some planning, you could probably play it like that. I think that it's a good kind of a starting way to get people to think about Dungeons and Dragons, because, you know, the whole title is, you know, Dungeons and Dragons. So Dragon Delve kind of gives you a little bit of both. and I believe that the artwork is pretty good. And what I noticed is that most of the art is centered around each chapter. So, for instance, like some have this black and white type, or these old school pictures, and then other adventures have like, you know, like some of these classic stuff in here, and then they also have artwork from more like previous or newer artists. So I do like that they included like this really like nostalgic artwork that came out of the older series. So like you can see how this is like 1977 Sutherland's edition, and here's Nelson's version, and you know these are different artists over the years. Here's Jeff Easley, Dragons of Faith. I believe that was Dragonlance. And then you have like all these different formats. Like this one came out of, I believe, probably 4th edition or 3rd. And then that's a Magic the Gathering. But they, well, it's kind of like, I guess it's for Baldur's Gate, the Battle for Baldur's Gate. Here's from the Draconomicon. And here's 2009. So it includes a lot of the art from even from like the old school days. So it comes like from the past all the way up to like more of a present. I think that was kind of a good move on their part. So here's the Monster Manual version, 2025, Matt Stewart. Here's the 2023 concept art. Really like that. That's nice. That looks kind of like you would get with a mini. I think that kind of looks more like a mini type thing. And here's the 2014 Monster Manual version. So they really kind of tried really hard, it looks like, to include the classic stuff along with the newer stuff. So let's take a look at the Red Dragon. So, oh yeah, here's the evolution of art. You know, you get these, let's see, there's 84, 93, 77, 2003. There's a 2021 Red Dragon, the 2003, 2014 Red Dragon. I really like this one. I like that style of art. Zach Stella. Yeah, so lots of really good art that kind of shows you the progression of different styles of art from different editions of the 5e rule set. And I think that's one reason why they kind of didn't want to tie it to like the Forgotten Realms or anything in particular, because they want you to just play and place these one-shots wherever you want. That's a good idea. So they even gets into like the history of these creatures. So they shows you the art history. That's basically what that is. And then there's an adventure tied into it. So for the Red Dragon, it looks like they have included a lot of this like old school style maps. And then other adventures will give you like full color. So you're going to get a variety of art style, just black and white sketches, and then some of them are going to be colors. Let's take a look at the White Dragon one. So let's take a look. Yeah, so this is more of color pictures, like comic book style. This is more like closer to 4th edition and the 5e classic version. So I want to pop up a map. I already kind of have one. This is the first adventure, which deals with the, it's called the Sunset's Lair, or Death at Sunset. And this is the Fantasy Grounds map for that. So this is one of the first adventures, spoiler alert. And if you've played Fantasy Grounds or you're just kind of checking it out, these little red pins here are for the GM. Players won't see that. But when your tokens or your players are moving into this section, you click on one of the links and it kind of tells you what's going on. So in this case, if your players were going to approach from this Redwood Grove and they get close to L1, you can send a text over to the chat area. It says, the tunnel from above leads into a dank, sprawling cavern, walled with dirt and twisting roots. Enormous claw marks mar the walls. So you can read that, or the players can read that. And then it gets into the encounter. So it pulls up the encounter, which has these NPCs here. And it looks like they're already pre-placed. So this little check mark means they're already pre-placed on the map. And I believe these are NPC, I think they're elves. They're protecting this lair, I believe. And it says it's a guarded tunnel. So there's an acid vial for treasure loot. And it kind of tells you how this thing, how it works. So supposedly there's some 4 elves. They're like basically statted out like medium guards. They're from the Redwood Watch. So there's 4 elves, and the elves are hostile towards the characters. As soon as the characters venture 10 feet or more into this area, the elves begin to attack. So basically, this is all set up to where you can run this adventure, and then there's obviously I wouldn't say a boss lair, but kind of like that in this case. And it looks like there's some venomous snakes in here. There's a snake pit in L2, and Maralissa's quarters. So it looks like a snake type thing, venomous snake. Who's Maralissa? Yeah, she's some kind of like Wanty, I believe. Yeah. So you kind of get this adventure where you're not really fighting the dragon. You're kind of fighting the remnants of its legacy. So this is probably the carcass of the dragon, and then there's some Wanty in here and such. And it looks to me like not every adventure is necessarily a fight with a dragon. You might be working with dragons, or you might even be fighting like the leftovers of a previous dragon, that sort of thing. So that's kind of how this one looks like it plays out. It's more of a aftermath after the dragon's, been gone for a while, but it still leaves that legacy, so it leaves stuff behind. But this one has a green dragon wormling, so it was a hatched egg. So, you got all different kinds of things. This one looks like it might be the centipede infestation. So it's not too bad. Like, here's the map close in. So they don't generally make maps for, like, there's obviously a lot better maps out there for different rule sets and from different authors and artists. But I imagine when this stuff comes out, there's tons of assets that get released. Like on the DM's Guild, on the Fantasy Grounds Forge. Some of you use the Roll20 store. There's tokens and maps on those. So there's all kinds of content that usually comes out. If you go, I almost bet there's going to already be something for this. So let's check that out. Let's test my theory out here. So I'm going to go to the DM's Guild, which I don't go there as often as I used to. And that's because a lot of times it's geared more towards Roll20 now. Before it was kind of more open, but there was just Fantasy Grounds stuff at one point. But once they bought the one bookshelf out, it kind of became more geared towards that. So let me go to the DM's Guild. Let's see what we got here. So here's the DM's Guild. It looks like, let's see if they've got anything that's related to this. So go to the storyline. Yeah, Dragon Delve. So if you click on that, that's going to filter out. So anything that's going to be available for that particular rule set will be listed here. So it looks like there's a few things, not quite exactly all, but heroic maps, they're usually ahead of the curve here. So if you like that style of maps, you can buy the whole set. So if you don't like the ones that come with the adventure, you can always find third-party ones and put those in the Fantasy Grounds. But just remember that you have to, or if you use line of sight, you'll have to set that up again. But there's a bundle for like $10, normally $78. I think I'll add that to my cart just for the hell of it. That's definitely worth it. And then I'll put these other ones in my favorites. This is the Dolmenwood stuff. I was checking out the adventures. So that's totally worth it. Let's take a look at what the quality of this looks like. So, if you're not stuck with just what comes with the adventures, if you really want to expand it or have better looking maps, you generally can find some. So let's just take a look at here's Death at Sunset. Here's the first one that we were kind of looking at before. But see, they've broken this up into sections where you can print this off as a PDF. But you don't just get a PDF. You usually they have a virtual tabletop version, which is what this collection was. And when you buy those, you generally get everything. Like this has the virtual tabletop maps, it has the PDF, full-size image, and then 72 DPI or 140 by 140 for Roll20 and other virtual tabletops. So you can replace your adventures maps. It just takes some work. So with all this stuff here, the actual map itself, so if you didn't want to use this map, you could actually go in and create another image or import the image, move these links over to the new map. You can unlock them, and you can add your own line of sight to them, like kind of like this is. And then you can place your encounters where you want. And this is kind of cool, whoever did this. This is kind of like a mist type thing. And I've done this before where you take two different effects. And this one, I think it only has one effect. But basically, this is confined to this zone. And it kind of looks like there's mist going over. But you could take two and go opposite direction and make it look like it's swirling. So they've kind of done, and then there's labels on here that are on a separate layer. So that's all these like L7, L4. And these actually are, I don't know why these are shared with players. It should be, oh, these are, okay, so, yeah, I don't know if these labels should be shared with players, but you can, let's see. So GM only is probably what, the player key, yeah, you'd want that. The effects, yes. But I think it's settled to where, okay, they are. It's set up right. So labels is shared because that's a folder. But within that folder, the only thing that's shared with players is this effect layer. The player key, whatever that is, I don't know it. Probably this stuff up here. And then your actual numbers and letters, those are only GM only. And the miasma zone, yep. So these are things that you'll notice with the newer maps is that they have a layer or several layers for the GM, and then they'll have the player layer. So you don't have to have two maps anymore. So if you notice, like the older adventures, you would buy and you get two versions. You get one for players, one for GMs. Generally, the GM one was kind of crappy. It really was low quality. It just had the locations on it and some notes. But now you can combine them and just have one map, which is kind of good for Fantasy Grounds because it cuts down on the amount of files that you have to deal with. And as a GM, I like to see the nice color detail. I don't like the crappy, older, low-res GM maps. They did that to save room, but now you only have one. You have to worry about it too much. And then you also have, these keyed locations. So that's all done for you. So if you want something that's already kind of ready to go, you just use what they give you. But if you want to, add more stuff to it or have new maps or whatever, you can do that. It just takes a little effort, a little bit of work. And if you're not familiar with Fantasy Grounds, I would just use what they have, and then later on maybe go back and play around with it and see what you can do with it. But wow, this has a big hoard. Wow. 210 gold, bunch of copper, bunch of silver. So there's the parcel right there. So if you're playing Fantasy Grounds and you want to award your players, you drag and drop this record into the party sheet, and that will populate that. So if you click on the inventory tab, and if your players are on the party sheet, you can award them with it. So if you take the parcel and drag it over here, it lists all the items, and then it drops the coins over here. So then what happens is when it's time to buy, sell, and trade or award your players, you can take all these items and you could share this tab, this inventory tab, with your players. And you can tell them to grab whatever item they want, and anything that's left over, right now it's set at 50%. So if these have a cost associated, so let's look at the Jade Orb. So the Jade Orb's worth 100. So if you sold that, you would only get 50%, so that'd be 50 coins. And then the coins would go over and be converted to gold. And then when you click this down arrow, it'll actually convert the coins and all. Or when you click this arrow, the side arrow, it'll convert it to coins. And then when you're all done, everyone's got everything, or you have an assignment type here, you click the down arrow and it will distribute the coins evenly as it can, and then all the items would get distributed based on who's assigned to it. If nobody's assigned to it, then it'll just stay here. But if you have uneven coins, they don't convert automatically. So if you have 4 players, but you only have 5 gold, it'll give each player 1 gold, but it's not going to take the last gold piece and convert it to silver. You have to manually do that. So anyway, so that's just some of the things you'll notice in the adventure. And that's kind of the status quo, I guess, for the adventures now. Is instead of having a bunch of story entries, which used to be the thing for old adventures. So if you came down to, where's stories at? Under world, go to story. It's not really a thing anymore. Let's see, let's go to Dragon Delves. So there's, there's pictures here with titles and such, but these are not necessarily story entry like you would see in the book. So there's a lot of different things that were set up differently, but they did do this one kind of like the old school way. So they has both. But in some cases, you'll only have the book. So if you go to the books and click on Dragon Delves, it'll be in this format. But I guess they did actually make the story entries in this one. And that might have been because it is an older, this isn't old, it's new to us, but I mean, when they got the content, maybe they decided to include the story entries. I don't know if that's a new standard or just the way it worked out, but this is for Dragon Delves. So yeah, they did kind of break this out into stories. So whoever converted that decided to do that, I guess. But not every adventure has the story entries. They're usually all inside the book. So this actually has both. It's kind of cool. I like the old way for some stuff, and then other times it doesn't matter to me too much. Yeah, so these are individual pages, and then you also have the storybook. So it isn't just one or the other, it's both in this case. I see. Yep, pretty neat. So Death at Sunset, this talks about the plot points. Let's see, you had the Redwood Watch, Unnatural Corruption, and the Green Dragon Wormling. So those are the key plot points for the first adventure. And then step 4, bookmark the following stat blocks in the monster manual or on D&D Beyond. So this assumes that you have the hardback book or one of the other formats, but for Fantasy Grounds, you generally don't need to worry about that. If you actually click on NPCs and then you click on the actual adventure, so Death at Sunset, this is all the NPCs that are in that adventure. So technically, you don't even really need the monster manual in most cases because all that stuff's already, built into Fantasy Grounds. It's already grouped together. So you don't really have to bookmark those. The only thing I would say for my own sake, this is my own kind of preference, is that I would want to have all of those things as links instead of a list. So instead of listing them here, this is probably what it looks like in a book or in a PDF or something like that. And there is a nice formatted list, kind of the key NPCs down here. But I would actually probably unlock this and redesign that section. And I'd actually probably make a new group here or another story section here. And then I would link all of these over to the page. That way I don't have to go to NPCs and open that up or just have the names here. It'd actually have all the links. And maybe they are somewhere else in here. Maybe there's an index. Here's the conclusion. No. But usually there's like a crib sheet, like it has like all the different things linked together. I kind of like that because it makes it more convenient. I don't have to go digging through the Fantasy Grounds interface to do that. But that's a kind of a a choice, right? That's not a requirement. That's not what the book has in it. But if you're going to have a virtual tabletop, I believe that harnessing as much of the power in it that you can is important. I think having those links somewhere in the adventure, like in this case, I would probably have it, where they listed those. Instead of listing them like this, I would have drug over the links and made that, because that's another list, right? So just drag these links over to each one of these, but some of these may not be needed, and maybe some of these aren't even NPCs. Like the sickening miasma is not really a NPC. It's just a convenient way to apply the damage. But the twig blight is something, I believe. Yeah, so that's not in here either. But if you're going to do this and make all the NPCs, you might as well link them somewhere, or a separate page with an appendix that has just the whole list of them in one area. That's kind of my interpretation of it. Like if I did the conversion for myself, that's the way I would do it. But that's kind of up to their best practices, their standards, and the person doing that conversion. So not all conversions are going to be the same. You're going to have a little variation because they have different people doing these. It's not the same person over and over. So that's one thing that you'll find with some of the Fantasy Grounds content is the consistency is, kind of consistent between rule sets, but, when you get, like, Zacchaeus does most of the 5e stuff, his work, and then if you switch over to, like, Pathfinder, then Shade Raven does a lot of the Pathfinder conversions. Not all of them, but he does a lot of them. So there's a lot of that kind of thing that you'll notice. But if you really wanted to edit these just for this campaign, you can unlock the page and edit to your heart's content. So, for example, here's the venomous snake. I don't know where this thing comes from. Probably the adventure. It didn't include the art. So, again, this is something that I would, my little nitpickiness here is I would find a token camera image and a picture for it if I didn't have it. But if you don't own the monster manual, or you don't own the content that has it, you'll have to kind of figure out on your own. But let me look at the monster manual just in case. I want to see what that has in it for a venomous snake, because that's probably comes out of the SRD or the player's handbook and may not have as much art. So let me go to the Dungeon Master's Guide, because they could have been working on this before the full monster manual was released. Things like that happen. That's the DM's guide. I want the monster manual. Okay, so let's go down to V and see if the venomous snake is in here. Nope. So where else does that exist? So I guess what I'll do is instead I'll go to all, so I'll have all the books showing, and let's go to venomous snake. Venomous snake. Did I spell it right? I'll just go to snake. Yeah, so there's one in the monster manual. And I guess that's the way it is. No real token or picture. That's amazing. Dragon Delves has one, and the player's handbook has one. Yeah, so they're all like that all the way across. So not everything has an art piece. Obviously, they're probably thinking, okay, this ain't worth it to have a venomous snake, and all the different products. But something like that, I would definitely want to have art. So in this case, for my own table, my own peace of mind, I'd probably source out something. I'd either make it with an AI tool, or would get something online, edit it, and put it in here and use that instead of just the letter V. So you'll see that occasionally, and a lot of that stems from the source. So it isn't Fantasy Grounds' fault that they didn't put the artwork in it. That's up to Wizards of the Coast. So that's just kind of the way the ball bounces. Like, there's some things that have full artwork and such, and other things that don't. So let's check out the Flying Snake. Flying Snake doesn't have one? I can't believe it. So constrictor snake. Let's see if that one has it. So yeah, see, this one has art. So it has, has a token, has the camera art, and then the nice art picture here, which is pretty much the same as the camera in this case. But I would wish that they have this for most of the things in here, or all, if not. So out of all the snakes, we only have... Wow, I can't believe that. Oh, let's see this. Yeah, so the salamander fire snake has art. The flying snake does not, which would have been cool, because that could have been like... nothing new or fun is ever shown for older rule sets. Kraken, that's a good question. It's always 5e because that's what I know. And just remember that this is a community thing, so I'm only showing what I know. I don't have necessarily all those different rule sets, although I do have some second edition. But a lot of that is kind of rehashed, right? So there's probably a lot of D&D stuff out there already, even though it's not Fantasy Grounds. Castles and Crusades hasn't seen a lot of love, but it is getting better, I do say. Pathfinder 1 was the first rule set, I believe, in Fantasy Grounds. There is a lot of older content, but nothing new for that. And why is it always 5e? Probably because it's the most popular. It's what most people use. So my apologies on that. I don't know what to say, but I don't really necessarily have that. But for second edition and for classic D&D, for Founders Day, we're having Tenkar Taverns and Celestian, who did all of the conversions for Fantasy Grounds. So if you're interested in that, I'm going to do a show with them. I believe it's on a Sunday. I think it's the 27th or 26th of this month. So it's not always going to be 5e. And then I think we're going to do, there's a couple games going on, and then there's some couple people doing extensions that they want to show some of their work. So nothing new or fun is it? Yeah, see, probably because it is old, and a lot of us are, I'm old enough to know what that is, but a lot of the newer people getting into this probably don't know or see much of it. It's probably just a visibility thing, popularity, that sort of thing. But for myself, I just know the 5e rule set pretty well enough to talk about it. I mean, I know second edition enough, but I don't know it in Fantasy Grounds well enough to talk about it because I don't use it. So I kind of use, I have no interest in modern tabletop. Yeah, I hear you. There's some people that don't. There's some modern tabletop stuff that I don't care for either. But I've also been checking out Cyberpunk and Fallout and some other stuff. So, science fiction stuff. So not always 5e, but a majority of it is. This thing just came out, so that's one reason we're showing this off a little bit. And I don't want to give away too many spoilers, guys. So, if this is something that is not interesting to you, or you don't want to hear about, more of it, let me know in the comments. And then also just remember that you don't purposely perpetuate 5e intentionally. It's just what I know. So, it's not. And just remember, I don't work for Smiteworks, so I'm not really necessarily, their point of contact for marketing. But I just like doing this for you guys, for the community, so you guys can see what you're getting into before you buy it. And also give you some ideas. I do a lot of blah, 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 blah. So this isn't really a tutorial either. This is more like, here's what it is. This is the stuff you get. Here's some ideas, take it or leave it. I'm not an expert. I've just been using Fantasy Grounds since 2017, I think, and then I bought it in 2011. So, anyways, I think I'm going to let you guys go. I think I babbled enough, but just remember that if you do buy this adventure, you get these fancy dice, and it's mostly probably going to be GM only unless your player buys the adventure. And then for the pre-sale, that's what you're basically getting, or for the purchase. Not very many exclusive items of Fantasy Grounds, so yeah, I see. Yeah, I hear you. Progressive slants to Wizard. Yeah, it really does, but unless you were around between the the 60s, 70s, 80s, early 90s, no one's going to care that much, except for us old guys. And by the time that they do get out there, we'll probably all be passed away by then, unfortunately. But nonetheless, it's just like anything else. Like, like some of the classic music, you have like a certain percentage of people who like Beethoven or Elvis Presley or something like that. But there's no way to enforce that. I don't know how to do it. Other than maybe occasionally having a show like we're having to talk about those, but we don't really focus on that. There are other channels that would do that, like that's why we're having Tanker on, because that's what he does. So anyway, so you guys have enjoy the rest of your weekend. Hopefully you're enjoying your summer. I'm up here in the Northwest, pretty hot right now, and if you guys are down in Texas where all that flooding is, my heart's thinking about y'all, and anyone serving for us in the military, thanks for your service, and you guys have a great day and good evening and happy gaming, man. All right.